sitting there talking with a man who retired as the Chicago PD, and he was asking me what I did. And the way I explained this particular one here, if we were lifeguards and we saw somebody out there flailing in the water, what lifeguard would say, oh, he's not serious. He's just wanting attention, right? No, do your job, get your buoy, get out there and save the man's life. If he's showing signs, he's serious that he's hurting. And so we want to intervene. We want to take the steps necessary to make sure that that person stays safe. Let's look at the next one. Talking about suicide increases risk. True or false?
False.
False. It actually decreases the risk. It is not talking about it that actually increases it, because we stigmatize it so much and make the person feel even worse than they did before, because now, oh, I'm an oddball. I'm an oddball. I've had thoughts of suicide. No, you're not. 1 out of 10 people have thoughts of suicide, so you're right there with the rest of us. So if we talk about it, it loses its power. That's the power of counselors. You know, the Bible says there's wisdom in godly counsel. And so we've got to talk about it. And we've got to be willing to have the courage to ask people, are you having that thought? And it will lose its power. It'll lose its power. Here's another one. Teenagers are the ones that are most at risk. True or false? It's actually false. We hear a lot about teenage suicide because it's the number 2 cause of death for teenagers. All the rest of us is number 10 cause of suicide. But teenagers don't typically die from Parkinson's. They don't die from Alzheimer's. They don't typically die from cancer. Yes, some do. But typically, it's going to be car accidents, number 1, and suicide, number 2. But overall, teenagers are the most resilient group out there. I used to think, well, I'm 62 years old now. Our, older folks would think our generation was far more resilient than the teenage generation. You know what? I don't think that anymore. I think that they're very resilient. I wonder, if I were back there with them going through my teen years right now, it's not the same as when me and Chris were going through it, right? We know that. They're facing so many things today that we didn't face. If I had a bully in the 8th grade, and I did, that's why I started lifting weights and overcame that. But at least I could go home and play with my friends, and I wasn't getting beat up on social media. I didn't have to deal with that when I was 15, 16 years old. But kids today, they're always getting beat up 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so kids today are struggling with far more things than us older folks struggled with when we were kids. And so I think they're the most resilient group. In fact, the numbers indicate they are the most resilient group. And so when you hit 20, guess what? The suicide rate goes up. When you hit 30, it goes up. When you hit 40, it goes up. When you hit 50, 50 is where it caps out. And after 50 and 60, it kind of levels off and plateaus. But 50-year-olds are the most at risk for suicide. And so when I'm talking with a teenager, I may use a different approach from when I'm talking with somebody that's 60, 70 years old. The 70-year-old, I'm going to say, hey, man, you've made it this far. I know things are weird today, but let's just stick around out of sheer morbid curiosity, right? Let's just do that. See what happens next. Stay around for the rest of the game, right? Suicide always occurs without warning. True or false?
False.
False. All of these are false. Now, I will say this. 1 out of 5 people will not show any signs that they're at risk of suicide. So if you got the guy out there in the ocean doing the backstroke or doing the breaststroke or whatever, he may not realize that jaws are about to come up and grab him, or he may not realize he's about to swim into a pool of, what did I call them a while ago? Box jellyfish. Or he may not realize he's fixing to get into a riptide. So that can happen. But suicide does usually have some type of warning sign for about 80% of people. They will somehow let you know, whether it's backing off from doing their job the way they should do it, or all of a sudden their grades go down, or maybe they're not showing up for church anymore, or whatever it is that you do in the community together. 80% of the time, there's going to be some type of warning sign. All right, let's go to the next one. A few more. I may be wrong. I may put the thought in their head, or they'll be offended. You are never wrong to ask someone if they're having thoughts of suicide. Now, they may not be suicidal. That's not going to put the thought in their head, and they're not going to be offended. I have a lot of people, what if they're offended? I've never had anybody offended. I've done over 2,000 suicide interventions. I've asked the question thousands of times more than that. Some people were not suicidal, but they weren't offended. But guess what? 3 months, 6 months, a year later, when they are suicidal, guess who they know they can come to? They know they can come to me because I'm willing to have that discussion with them. So you're never wrong to ask the suicide question. All right, let's jump into our 5 core values. Go ahead and pop all of them up there. Suicide is not the result of wanting to die. Suicide is a thought. Suicide makes sense, and life is full of questions. And the last one, it's not what you look at that matters. So, this is the core values that I want you to take home with you tonight. It's not the bat. We've already looked at the bat. We got the listen, learn, lead model. That's our bat. These are the core values that we have. This is how we address the plate and keep our eye on the ball. So let's go to the next one. Suicide, Greg, is not, there you go. Suicide is not the result of wanting to die. Let me explain that a little bit. I've never met anybody that really wanted to die. Never. I've done over 2,000 suicide interventions, and none of the people that I talked with, they had the thoughts of suicide. Some of them had a plan, but none of them really wanted to die, and they're all still alive today, or they died of natural causes. Suicide is not the result of wanting to die, but suicide is the result of loss that leads to hopelessness, and that hopelessness is so overwhelming in the moment, I might add, that they feel like that's their only option. So many times I have people say, I just felt like it was my only option. And so I'm very frank with people. Let's talk about options. I used to be in real estate. I used to sell options on houses. And, and if you buy my option, then that gives you the option to either buy the house or not buy the house. And if you buy the house, you can rent it, renovate it, tear it down, live in it, do whatever you want to with it. But with suicide, there's no other options. Suicide's not an option. Suicide's an option ender. It ends all of our options. And I'm that frank with people when I talk to them and they say, I just felt like it was my only option. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's go to the next one. Help me finish this sentence. Suicide is a thought. It's a thought. And like any thought, we don't have to act on it, but we can talk about it. So let's talk about your thoughts of suicide. I had a young girl that was 13 years old when I first met her. I was speaking to a youth group of about 70 kids, and I had about 30 minutes to share my story. She came up to me afterward and she said, I realized tonight my life is at risk. We got her the help that she needed. My wife became part of her protocol and met with her once a month. And when she was 16, my wife called me and said, Ashley, got a question for you. So she put it on the phone and she said, Mr. Lou, have you ever heard of Hemingway? How many of y'all have heard of Hemingway? A few of you have heard of Hemingway. Hemingway killed himself. And along with 6 or 7 other Hemingway family members, they killed themselves. And I said, Ashley, you're not a Hemingway. Yeah, but we're just alike. I've had 6 family members that have killed themselves, and it's inevitable that I'm going to die from suicide. I said, Ashley, what did we learn when you were 13? Suicide is a thought. She finished the sentence. I didn't have to tell her the sentence. She finished it. She remembered. And like any thought, we don't have to act on it. Now, I know everybody here tonight, you're great folks, but let me ask you a question. Has anybody in this room tonight always acted on every thought you have? Anybody raise your hand? No, we wouldn't be here tonight. We'd be in jail, right? We don't act on every thought we have. We never have and we never will. So why do we have to act on suicide? We don't. Because it's like all the other thoughts that we don't act on. Because we know it wouldn't be a good thing that happens. My wife called me one night. Do y'all sell Tide here on the island, the powder? So she called me one night, and she said, can you pick up the biggest thing of powdered Tide? It's a man thing, one item, I can do it. Yep, all right, I'll do it. So I went to the laundry detergent line, got a big old 20-pound thing of powdered Tide, and I'm walking. I hate to use scanners. I like to be in front of people, so there was only one line, 10 items or less lane, one lady standing there taking stuff, everything else was scanners. So I start heading to the 10 items or less lane, and this little old lady had to be 85 years old. She saw me coming the opposite direction. She had way more than 10 items. And she, I caught her eye. It's always a bad thing when you catch somebody's eye because you know what they're thinking. And she started speeding up. She cuts me off. Oh, go ahead, ma'am. Yeah, most of us would say, sir, you got one item. You go ahead of it. Not this lady. She was vicious. And I'm standing behind her with 20 pounds of Tide. Now, I'm a Georgia Bulldog, but I wanted to roll Tide all over her head. But I didn't do it because I would have gotten in trouble. I've been in jail for attacking a little old lady with Tide. So we all have thoughts we don't act on. Suicide is a thought, and I don't have to act on it. And I share that story sometimes when I'm talking with people because it helps us to laugh. I hear some people laughing tonight. It helps to laugh. Laughter is good medicine. That's in the book, folks. It's in the book. If I can laugh, I can live. There's still some life in me. And so it doesn't hurt. Where does comedy fit into this? It fits when it works right? Y'all hear what I'm saying? Laughter is good medicine. Suicide makes sense. This one really caught a few folks off guard. Several years ago, we had a suicide in my community. I was 50 yards away when it happened. I didn't know it was going to happen. I was walking into Longhorns to eat dinner that night. And it happened right there at the red light, 50 yards away. So I walked down. I was there. The veteran had gotten pulled over. The cop was in shock. He was about 22 years old. The veteran that took his life was probably about 24 years old. And I had to go do the death notification that night. My name got in the paper, and over a 2-week period, I had to counsel about 50 people that were traumatized at the red light during rush hour. My eyes were bloodshot. I was meeting people at 11 o'clock at night at Waffle House to talk with them, or doing Zoom calls with people. How many counselors know 50 in 2 weeks is a lot? That's a lot. That's way too many. I was exhausted. So I came home one night about 11, and I got on Facebook, and I posted 3 words, suicide makes sense. And I turned my phone off, and I splashed my face, and I got into bed. And about 3 minutes later, my wife yelled out, she was still in the living room watching TV. She yelled out, "What did you do?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She said, "The sheriff's headed to the house right now. Why did you post that?" I turned my phone back on because I didn't want no more calls that night. I had turned it off. It took a minute for it to restart, and I looked at oh my gosh, it was moving, Facebook. It was moving so fast, it looked like the New York Stock ticker stack, I'm going, oh my God, they're headed to that. I tried to call him, I can't reach him. What's his number? I headed to the house. What's his address? Oh, I called the sheriff. Sheriff's good friends of his. He's headed to the house right now. And my phone rang. And I said, hello? And the guy's like, is this voicemail? No, this is me. Oh, thank God you're still alive. We're headed to the house. Go home. Why did you post that? You're the suicide guy, and you just said suicide makes sense. I was tired. I shouldn't have said that. If you came to my class, you would know what it's about. And I do things. How many of us know we do things when we're tired that we wouldn't normally do? I should not have posted that. I shouldn't have done it. But I did. And you're not suicidal. No, I'm not. Well, what does that mean? Well, suicide makes sense for many people up until that moment that a caring person asks them, are you having thoughts of suicide? And then